With 89 legendary lords in-game, there are bound to be those campaigns that you'd rather just live without. Campaigns so challenging that they become an any percent speedrun of closing the game. Today we're counting down the top 10 hardest campaigns in Immortal Empires. And just like last time, only one per faction. And be sure to stick around till the end to learn how you can get some free meals with HelloFresh. First up we have SKRAG. Honestly, neither of the Ogre Boys are particularly good starts, but SKRAG really takes the cake. He's pretty much exactly in the middle of the map, so if you want to go wherever you want, he has that going for him. Sadly, that's about all he does have going for him, as he's nowhere near to anyone likely to be friendly with him, so he'll be surrounded by enemies, and the Ogres aren't exactly the most snowbally of factions at the best of times. It probably wouldn't be so bad if the Ogre Kingdoms as a faction were a little bit better, but as they are right now, it's rough no matter what, especially for poor SKRAG. Yeah, the Starting War is a minor faction, technically, but as Starting Wars go, the Border Princes are pretty tough, since they have a large number of settlements and won't let go of them too easily. Add on the fact that early on you have access to basically no units from camps, no bonuses from meat, names or anything else, and the early struggle is absolutely very real. Your options for expansion may go in every direction, but none of them are particularly easy, with the Empire to the north, Dwarf and Greenskin to the east and south, and a buffet table of tough factions in the west. He may be called SKRAG the Slaughterer, but make no mistake, if you pick up his Immortal Empires campaign, it'll be you getting slaughtered. Coming in 9th, we have REPANSE de LYONESSE. REPANSE has always had it rough since her introduction, and while that may have been sort of the point, it doesn't make her any easier. Starting out in the desert with basically no friends and a load of spooky, scary skeletons to take out is going to be a challenge for anyone from any faction, but for Bretonnia, it's even worse. The early game is pretty pathetic, with peasants galore and no real decent cav units for a good few turns, meaning you'll be losing units en masse as you struggle your way out of the starting blocks of the game. Add on the fact that most of the factions in the Badlands and desert areas these days are major factions, like most of the Tomb Kings, Manfred, Greenskins and Skarbrand, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of major threats for a very long time. The only minor consolation is there are a couple of other Bretonians in this hellscape that you either get to work alongside or confederate for extra power, but it's not really going to make things that much easier. If anything, now you have extra laws to complete side quests for to be able to recruit halfway decent units, and that's even if you can get the buildings to use them. The Bretonian early game is rough at the best of times. Putting them in such a hostile location alongside this is just bullying. In 8th place, we have CYLOSTRA DIREFIN. Honestly, I ping-pong back and forth between IRONHAMMER and CYLOSTRA for being the worst, and the last few times I landed on IRONHAMMER, so why not take DIREFIN for a spin? The location is arguably worse, on the shores of the Dark Elves who hate you, a short boat ride from the High Elves who also hate you, and some starting units who may not hate you, but you'll learn to hate them. Your entire gimmick is ethereal, and that'd be fine if everyone and their dog didn't have easy access to magical damage since Immortal Empires has dropped. That advantage she gets from physical resistance will be useful for about 5 minutes before becoming detrimental to her cause. And if you're wondering, 5 minutes translates to about 1 turn. You'll love those Immortal Empires turn timers. Back to her location, the Starting War is relatively tough compared to others, and within 10 turns she can be at war with multiple legendary lords depending which direction you choose to take her. As for CYLOSTRA herself, she has no lore of the vampire, so big L there already from me, has fine stats, but as soon as any damage is coming her way will be pretty useless until she gets the mount, so early game lord presence pretty much non-existent. Yeah, he's ethereal and will fight okay to start off with, but once there's any damage, especially magical coming, he'll fold like a sheet. She's nothing special and has nothing special. IRONHAMMER has those Sartosan units to spice things up, but all you get with her is the colour blue to match your mood. In 7th place, we have Grand HIEROPHANT KHATEP. KHATEP has always had it rough since his inception, and honestly, it's only ever got worse. He starts off extremely far from the desert, where basically everything relevant to his faction lives, like every single one of the pyramids, and any potential friends. His starting war is pretty damn tough, with some big, mean greenskins in the way of his starting province completion. Beyond that, he has more threats than ever, with the usual rats and dark elves, but now he also has to worry about the spooky, scary chaos coming down from the north too. His early game outside of this position is also pretty rough. He's a really weak early lord before he gets spells and a mount, so will be pretty non-existent on the battlefield to start off with. The Tomb King early roster is also pretty weak, and compounds his struggle just a little bit more. His starting armor is pretty damn weak too, considering what he could have won with the rest of the roster. Beyond the early game, if you manage to survive the Greenskins, as I mentioned, you have tough expansion in every direction, and if you ever want to get back to the desert to claim some pyramids, at best, you're looking at a tens of turns long pilgrimage if you even survive the trip to meet land at the other side. I think the only upside is he's different to the others, and may be able to get some of those distant books in Magash just a little bit faster, but aside from that, he's pretty damn sucky. In 6th place, next up we have Boris URSUSSY Ursus. Do I really need to go beyond his starting location? My man starts out in the middle of the Chaos Wastes with not a single settlement to his name. The goal of his campaign is to pretty much clear out Chaos, starting with Archeon, then moving on to anyone else you find up there. He has this job to do pretty much all alone with no support outside of a good father-daughter relationship and some bear buffs, but it's bear directly enough to keep him going. It's one of those that doesn't seem too bad, but the wars just add up over time with more and more factions declaring war on you, putting you under more and more pressure until you literally can't take it. You're a single faction, no matter how well you play, this many wars all at once will start to weigh you down and push you back. It very quickly becomes you desperately trying to hold onto your territory as you get attacked on all sides by every flavour of chaos under the sun. Boris and the faction are honestly fine, and if they were anywhere else I'd probably call them good, but this starting location is far too hostile for a faction like Kislev to survive with no external support from the mainland. If you can manage to pick off Archeon, then dip down into the old world and have a slightly more secure base, you'll probably have a better time, but until then, you're going to struggle. Breaking into the top 5 we have ELTHARION the Grim. Is anyone else surprised to see a high elf on this list? Well, you shouldn't be, because ELTHARION has one of the toughest factions in the game, and honestly, it doesn't matter if you keep Ivres or not. The expedition into the Badlands is a real challenge, especially when you start with no base camp to fight out of. You're starting from scratch in terms of settlements down there, which means delayed access to stronger units, poor economy and less safety to fall back on if you get under too much pressure. Honestly, this is a case where getting rid of his other settlement and army will probably only make things worse, as you need that steady income and backup settlement if things really go south in the south. The Badlands are a real royal rumble these days, so it's going to be tougher than ever to make any headway. If you do choose to keep Ivres and the extra army, you're going to be dealing with the early struggles of building up 2 provinces and armies at once when you really cannot afford it. Normally you funnel all early income into one army and one province to grow them as fast as possible to get more income until you can afford a second army and invade more provinces. Starting with 2 right out the gate, but not the income to support them, quickly runs your treasury dry, and without constant battle victories, you're going to be looking down the back of the sofa for change pretty much every time you want to buy anything. 2 starting locations far from each other is always hard. This one has only got harder over time, especially for a newer player, and it's one of the least inviting campaigns in the game. In 4th place we have BELEGAR IRONHAMMER. I mean, BELEGAR kinda has to be mentioned on these lists by law since his start has always been terrible as part of his character. He's of course tasked with claiming Karak 8 peaks as soon as possible to get a hold of some unique buffs and buildings, as well as turn his upkeep down to normal. Until then, he'll be dealing with massively increased military wages, meaning he can just about afford a single army to take over and get control of the legendary settlement as fast as possible. Honestly, the distance nor the force you meet there are the real issue in this. It's more so the time it'll take to get you there. You can take your starting settlement and confederate another on the way to have a relatively safe trip over, but you're still looking at a 10-turn trip when you factor in everything in your way. That's 10 turns of increased upkeep that you for sure won't be able to afford, especially if you're fielding the minimum spec army needed to take peaks back for yourself. Now you do have those ancestral heroes which do help a lot, but it's still a super tough start to the campaign. Once you have 8 peaks, it is a lot easier, but getting to that point is a pretty large mountain to climb right at the beginning of your journey. In 3rd place we have the man, the myth, the legend, Nakai. Nakai has always been a bit of a laughingstock in the Lizardmen since he's been terrible for years, and while I do think he's a tiny bit better in Immortal Empires, he's still pretty sucky. His starting location is a little bit better, but you're still looking at a faction that can't even auto-resolve win their first battle on normal difficulty. If that doesn't tell you how bad this guy is right out the gate, I don't know what will, because literally every faction can do that, but he can't. Even after his terrible start, he's just not a great faction. The weird blend of horde and settlement gameplay just does not work, and every turn is a struggle for a number of essential campaign ingredients, whether it's money, unit health, or will to live. I pray that when the Lizards get their next DLC, they give Nakai a full rework because he just sucks so much. If he's going to be horde, figure out how to manage his upkeep at least early on to give him a fighting chance and make recruitment less convoluted. I feel like I could make an entire video on how to rework Nakai, and I might just do that in future. But until then, he can remain one of the worst campaigns in the game. Coming in 2nd place, we have SKARSNIK, the matching campaign to BELEGAR, and I would argue that despite being closer distance-wise, SKARSNIK has the much harder go at it, and yes, I'm even factoring in that the Greenskins overall probably a better faction. Instead of upkeep increases, he can only use goblin units, and goblins, they just really aren't all that great. Taking 8 peaks with just goblins is going to test anyone's sanity, let alone making your way down there whilst fighting through other greenskins, dwarves, and more en route. Add on the fact he has no legendary heroes to help him on his quest and isn't really the best lord in the game in terms of carrying his army either, and you're going to have a rough time as SKARSNIK right from the get-go. The one advantage he has over BELEGAR is that you won't be running out of gold early on, since goblin units are pretty damn cheap. That being said, you'll probably need double the units to take the settlement for yourself, so in the end you're not really saving that extra cash. It's hard to really talk about SKARSNIK after already going over BELEGAR. The settlement is hard to take, and getting there with severe penalties makes it that much harder. I just feel like SKARSNIK has it a tiny bit harder with the purely goblin mode army. And in 1st place we have Markus WULFHART. It's kind of funny to me how Markus is far better than Nakai, his DLC compatriot, but I still think he has a harder campaign. Where the challenge in Nakai is derived from his mechanics making you want to quit the game, Markus has a different approach. His campaign pretty much sets the immediate world against you with the hostility mechanic, making nearby residents of Lustra even more powerful and aggressive the further you expand. And I don't know if you know this, but you kind of have to expand to progress in this game. Every step towards progress is met with more challenge. The 2 saving graces are that he has his merry band of heroes which can pick up over the course of his campaign to give him a hand, and Lustra isn't as bad as it once was, so it's technically the easiest he's ever had it. But the easiest Markus form is still harder than pretty much any other campaign. Add-on is limited access to the roster, the distance from any potential allies, and this campaign is for a true masochist. That being said, it's still pretty fun with the collectible heroes. You always have something to do, never have to worry about running out of enemies. If you're looking for a challenging campaign, then I highly recommend Markus. He's one of my favourites. While Nakai may be hard and also bad, Markus is rock hard but good, like a With's original. But if you're looking for something a little bit easier, then why not check out today's sponsor, HelloFresh. HelloFresh is the world's leading meal kit company, and they provide you with everything you need to cook delicious meals at home without having to go into the outside world to shop for ingredients. Every meal comes with easy to follow step-by-step instructions and pre-measured ingredients, so you can get to the fun part of cooking and eating without having to worry about any wasted ingredients. For us, for only 2 people, shopping and cooking is hard work, and you always end up with some leftovers, either ingredients or food that you have to deal with later on. So for us, HelloFresh works great for still having home-cooked meals without having to worry about what to do with the extra ingredients. We've been using them for a couple of weeks and they haven't missed yet. I even did a cooking stream on Twitch last week where I made a katsu chicken burger, and let me just tell you, it was pretty good. The final product, the stream, disaster. Add on the fact that they are committed to offsetting and reducing their carbon footprint by 100%, and there's really not anything to not like. So if you'd like to give it a try, then check out the link in the description or use the code POGTWITCH4740 to get 40% off your first 2 boxes and then 20% off the following 2 months. If you add all that up for us, you're looking at 12 free meals by the time those discounts end. So what's not to love? So check them out in the description. I really cannot recommend them enough. And now, onto the outro. And that's my list. Did I miss a campaign you think should have made the list? Leave it down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want to know which campaigns are the easiest in Warhammer 3, then check out this video to see the top 10.